Inspiring FBI agent silences racism on plane. Discover how one badge transformed the situation. Maya Thompson settled into her seat. The airplane vibrated with the hum of conversations, a cocktail of excitement and anxiety swirling around the cabin. Today marked the start of her career as an FBI agent, a dream carved from years of grit and determination. Yet, beneath her ambitious exterior, doubts festered. Raised by a single mother in Chicago, the lessons of resilience were engraved on her heart. But with them came enormous expectations, both from her past and the world that often judged her by stereotypes. As the plane took off, the cacophony of applause and conversations faded into a muffled backdrop, a fleeting moment of serenity shattered by a harsh voice. The man's furious outbursts pierced through the cabin, targeting a Muslim family seated nearby. Maya's throat tightened at the familiar sight, racial slurs, derogatory comments, the monster she was trained to confront, but now faced in a confined space. Her instinct to intervene conflicted sharply with her urge to blend in, to avoid backlash, to protect her family's legacy of dignity. Maya's heart raced. Should she remain an observer or confront the aggressor? The confrontation ignited conflicting emotions within her. She felt the weight of agency. This was her responsibility, yet the fear of failing lingered like smoke in the air. A single, torturous breath passed before she realized the weight didn't lie solely on her badge, but also on her identity, the culture she represented, and the hopes of those who came before her. Passengers whispered, their expressions a study in discomfort. Some shared sympathetic glances toward the vulnerable family, while others appeared unwilling to engage in the brewing chaos. Maya's internal turmoil swirled. Should she silence the hatred that echoed in that confined space, risking the safety net her badge provided, or retreat to the shadows, ensuring an uneasy peace? With each passing moment, the tension escalated. Clenched fists and averted gazes seemed to pulse around her, forming a fraying tapestry of moral dilemma. And suddenly, everything felt at stake: her identity, her career, her commitment to justice. Just then, a fleeting thought jostled her focus, a reminder of her mother's teachings to fight for what is right, to speak up when the silence of complacency wraps around you. It wasn't just about halting an insult. It was about transforming this narrative from one of anger into dialogue, from division to unity, albeit difficult within the cramped confines of an aircraft. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The stakes surged, squeezing her resolve. There she was, a newly minted FBI agent, gifted with authority, yet burdened with uncertainty. An audience held its breath mere inches away as she weighed the implications of her potential actions. All eyes were on her, the electric tension simmering between courage and fear. It was more than just a passenger's rant. It was a moment that could shape her career and soul, reflect her values, and ultimately define the essence of justice in America. Would she heed the call of her convictions and confront the man, or let this be another silent acceptance of hatred? The plane pressed on, its trajectory uncertain, just as Maya stood at the precipice of her own daunting decision, unaware of the ripple effect her next action could unleash. Maya's pulse throbbed in time with the engine's drone, drowning out the world around her as thoughts careened through her mind. She could feel their weight, the expectations of her mother, the years of hard work, and this new mantle of responsibility she had donned so eagerly. The man continued hurling insults, now accompanied by his companions, who laughed derisively, feeding off his vitriol like wolves at a kill. Maya glanced at the family, their faces taut with fear and resentment, their dignity under siege. Anger flared within her, igniting a sense of urgency that shredded through her indecision. This wasn't merely a challenge. It was an unyielding call to action that resonated with every lesson she had learned throughout her journey. Clenching her jaw, she rose from her seat, her movements unexpectedly steady. 1,000 premonitions of failure buzzed in her mind, yet she leaned into the fear. To stand back now would be an affront to every value she cherished and represented. She took a deep breath, suspecting this moment might irreversibly change her path. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cutting through the din of chaos as she took a deliberate step forward. The eyes of nearby passengers flitted toward her, apprehension and curiosity mingling in their expressions. The taunts dwindled. The aggressor turned, surprise morphing quickly into defiance. "What's it to you, lady?" he spat back. A flicker of triumph ignited in him at having redirected the spotlight. Maya felt the weight of his gaze, probing, judging. "It has everything to do with me, if you can't see that your words are hurting those innocent people." She gestured toward the family, where a small child clung to her mother, wide-eyed and terrified. "This isn't just about you feeling entitled to your anger. This is about human decency." The cabin vibrated with tension. A hush fell, the passengers caught in this fragile moment between confrontation and resolution. To Maya, it was no longer only the fight against racism, it was about reclaiming the power of dialogue, ensuring humanity's resonance echoed even in dissonance. She realized the potential for change, however small, lay within her words. At that instant, fragments of self-doubt began to dissolve. The responsibility she felt transformed into an unwavering commitment as she met the man's gaze, channeling the strength of her ancestors, every woman who had prayed for justice, every systemic battle that had been endured. Her voice strengthened, an avowal of solidarity. "We can't allow hate to dictate our interactions. We need to stand together, not against one another." A murmur rippled through the cabin, and she could sense a collective inhalation, as if others were summoning the courage she hadn't initially possessed. The aggressor's eyes darkened. He opened his mouth, a counterattack ready to launch, but the plane lurched slightly, and a flight attendant approached, alerted by the tense atmosphere. "Is everything all right here?" she asked, her focused gaze shifting between Maya and the man, sensing the charge in the air. Maya seized the moment, rallying her voice and heart fluidly to the task at hand. This man was just spreading hatred, and we can't allow that to happen. Her conviction radiated outward, igniting the collective spirit in the air. Suddenly, the weight in her chest began to dissipate. Maybe this was destined to be her mission, to leverage her badge not just as authority, but as a source of change, to ignite conversations where silence had once reigned. "Ma'am," the flight attendant said, looking back at the man, "I think we need to speak to you further about your behavior." The shift in power was palpable, a reflection of something seismic awakening within Maya. Yet, as she processed victory mingled with doubt, an intense sense of purpose bloomed. It was clear this was just the beginning. With the plane now steadying and the path to transformation laid bare, she realized tangible results were within reach, but at what cost to her fleeting comfort? The challenge ahead loomed larger now, and Maya braced herself for the possibility of greater trials in the journey to come. As the plane soared higher, so did her ambitions, yet the shadow of doubt clung. How would she confront the deeper prejudices that lurked beyond this moment? What awaited her on the ground was yet unknown, but she felt ready to face the obstacles ahead. The indomitable question lingered, echoing in her mind. What would she discover about herself as she continued forging her path through the complexity of justice? Maya sat back in her seat, a mix of exhilaration and apprehension coursing through her veins. The flight attendant's intervention had been a lifeline, but as the initial adrenaline rush subsided, she grappled with the depth of her own resolve. This was not just about standing up during a confrontation. It was about committing to a larger crusade against injustice. Doubts still clung like shadows at the edges of her mind. What if this moment was just a fluke? What if she couldn't muster the same courage when faced with deeper systemic issues on the ground? The flight continued, and as the aircraft skimmed above the clouds, Maya reflected on her training. After years at the FBI, she was equipped with techniques to face aggressors in a controlled environment. But here, in this swirling world of airborne vulnerability, she found herself confronting a different enemy, an insidious prejudice that could not be dispersed with mere technique. She turned towards the window, watching the sun peek out from behind a cloud, its rays illuminating the world below. The vastness stretched, like her ambitions, filled with possibility, but also uncertainty. For the first time, Maya acknowledged a flicker of self-awareness. She had innate strengths beyond the badge she wore, her capacity for empathy, her transformative ambition. They had always been lurking, waiting for a moment to break free. As the flight reached cruising altitude, passengers resumed their conversations, an undercurrent of nervous energy still hovering. The tension from earlier hadn't entirely lifted, and Maya could sense the shift in the air, weaving through the collective dread and courage. It was as if a ripple had been cast, mingling with each passenger's emotions. It was this intangible connection that ignited a sense of responsibility within her. She understood now that confronting racism wasn't merely about subduing aggressors. It was about facilitating understanding among those too afraid to speak. What if she could encourage those around her to see each other not as strangers, but as fellow human beings? A realization blossomed. This was more than corrective action. This was about fostering dialogue, dismantling preconceived notions, one conversation at a time. Deep down, she recognized the discomfort she'd faced throughout her own life as an immigrant, living between cultures. The more she acknowledged those internal struggles, the more powerful her voice became. She felt compelled to use her own experiences as a bridge of understanding, and it invigorated her resolve to challenge not just isolated moments of hate, but the entrenched biases they stemmed from. As the plane descended, she scribbled notes on a napkin, a plan forming in her mind. She would seek out community engagement forums upon landing, use her position as a platform to facilitate discussions. And while each engagement would come with its own challenges, misunderstandings, arguments, rejection, she felt a steely determination gather within her. But those thoughts were tempered by a question she couldn't ignore. Was she prepared for what confronted her later? Would the lessons learned in the sky translate to the turbulent ground below? The tension of impending uncertainty wrapped around her. At that moment, the seatbelt sign dinged, and her thoughts collided with the reality of her mission ahead. Would she have enough strength to maintain her voice when threats took on new forms, systems of bias, cultural indifference, or silent complicity among her peers? The aircraft rumbled slightly as it approached the landing strip, but Maya's heart raced with a growing insistence. Something within her shifted yet again, pushing her towards clarity and purpose. As the wheels touched the ground, she pondered her next move. Was she truly ready to step past mere words and into the realm of lasting impact? The idea flickered tantalizingly on the horizon of her thoughts. She would have to confront the invisible walls built over decades, walls that may very well oppose her every step. The moment she would make that leap of faith awaited her on the other side of the cabin door, and Maya felt an electric jolt of anticipation. Everything hung in that balance, a pivotal moment where potential meets reality, and she knew deep down that the true challenge had only just begun. The airplane doors swung open, and the rush of air that cascaded into the cabin felt revitalizing, a baptism of the world beyond. As passengers disembarked, Maya hesitated, anchoring herself within the chaos. The airport's vibrant hum, filled with announcements and footsteps, assaulted her senses, an arena beckoning her to engage and confront. She stood for a moment, her gaze drifting across the terminal filled with people from myriad backgrounds. Each face was a story, a struggle, an opportunity. Would they listen? Would they join her in conversations that could dismantle the barriers that segregated their experiences? Doubt loomed like a dark cloud, but she had touched a nerve of purpose in the air and couldn't retract. Maya's first step out of the terminal felt like stepping onto a tightrope, the ground beneath her simultaneously solid and fraught with risk. She reached for her phone, searching for community engagement forums, but as the device illuminated her face, she hesitated. Could she walk in and demand change, or was she merely a cog in the larger machinery? Each forum listed seemed daunting, an invitation to the unknown, rife with insecurities and the weight of expectations. But then she remembered the airplane, the moment she stood against an injustice. She had risen in a time of urgency. Now she simply needed to replicate that urgency on solid ground. It was time to channel her training. With a focused goal, she made her first call, her pulse steadying as she found her resolve. Days turned into a week, and as Maya organized her first discussion group, the atmosphere in her living room mirrored her swirling thoughts, expectant, shadowed by uncertainty. The collection of strangers who filled her space, a blend of ages and demographics, responded with skepticism and hope. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. Would they engage in meaningful dialogue, or would indifference foil her mission? The first hour was awkward. Small talk half-heartedly masked the palpable tension. When silence blanketed the room, Maya leaned into it, confronting her fear with an invitation. Let's share our experiences with prejudice. Each story can give us a better view of our community. As hands rose, so did conflicting emotions. Stories poured forth, revealing not just overt instances of racism, but systemic barriers woven through their shared histories. Maya navigated each conversation with finesse, leaning into the discomfort. She recognized the therapeutic potential in vulnerability, how shared experiences could catalyze empathy. Listening intently, she discovered a capacity within herself, seeing herself not just as a carrier of a badge, but as a facilitator of transformation. However, as the night wore on, Maya encountered resistance. A young man seated in the corner challenged her with deep-seated convictions, his words laced with anger and rejection. "What even is prejudice anymore?" he scoffed. "This is about personal responsibility, not labels." His words echoed the society outside, a sentiment she could not dismiss. Maya's heart raced. This was the confrontation she feared, challenging the very system she sought to dismantle, engaging with someone unwilling to recognize bias. Yet it also presented an opportunity to be the catalyst for change, to foster understanding within hostility. Taking a measured breath, she responded, "Every critique carries weight, but recognizing the freedom we have and the barriers some face can help build real dialogue. Tell me what responsibility means for you in your world." His hardened expression faltered, uncertainty creeping in as the room watched, suspended in anticipation. Maya felt the ground shift beneath her, her own heart pounding in recognition of the fragile crux they stood on. With the possibility of transformation hanging thick in the air, she understood this was just the beginning. Would she have the emotional stamina to confront such raw realities time and again? As moments stretched into conflict, Maya remembered the airplane. Her courage had sparked dialogue in a confined space. Perhaps they could escape their confines as well. That thought electrified her heart farther than fear ever could, reminding her that real conversations would require confronting not just others, but herself too. As she faced the young man, his defenses momentarily down, she felt a surge of determination. It was a make-or-break moment, a test of her will. Could she turn this confrontation into a compelling call for change, or would the moment slip away, swallowed by silence once again? The door to possibility had opened, but could she step through without faltering? The answer lay not only in her actions, but in the willingness of those around her to engage in their truths. And in that suspended moment, Maya knew another challenge awaited, a reckoning deep within and far beyond herself. Maya's pulse thudded in her ears, the silence in the room hanging like a weight. She felt the scrutiny of every gaze, each person hanging onto her words, waiting for her next move. The young man's skepticism mirrored the defensiveness that so often clouded conversations about bias, something Maya recognized all too well. Yet here she was, grappling not just with him, but with her own fears of inadequacy, her uncertainties about leading this charge for understanding. Every story changes the narrative, even if you believe the narrative is fixed, she said, keeping her voice steady. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she remained resolute. Discomfort flared within her, like embers threatening to spark into flame. If she faltered now, would they retreat back into apathy? His expression remained skeptical. What if those stories just reinforce the divide? What if it's about personal choices, not systemic issues? The challenge was clear, and Maya felt an instinctive impulse to rebut, but instead she paused. She needed to gather her thoughts, to frame her response with intent. Your perspective matters, and it's vital. Personal responsibility is crucial, but stories reveal the myriad layers at play. I think we can both recognize personal agency and see how systems shape those choices. Maya's voice gained strength with the conviction behind it. Can I share something? The young man shrugged, but several others nodded, inviting her to continue. I once had a colleague who struggled to get promoted despite her unparalleled work ethic. When we dug deeper, we discovered that subtle biases affected her evaluations. Her struggle wasn't just personal. It was a reflection of a broken system. Understanding her story helped us see change, not just for her, but for everyone impacted by the same biases. Maya could see some faces in the room begin to soften, the hesitance giving way to contemplation. It dawned on her that they were wrestling with a fundamental truth. The narratives unfolding were not isolated but interconnected. This realization inspired her to take a risk. What if we tried an exercise? Let's each take a moment to share a headline from our lives. What was a moment when your perspective was challenged? How did it shape you? She felt fear and exhilaration surge through her. What if this was a pivotal turning point? Hands shot up again, this time with an eagerness she had not expected. Maya gestured to a middle-aged woman who began recounting her experience moving to a new city, facing prejudice for her accent. There was power in her words, a raw honesty. Maya nodded, encouraging her to go deeper, extracting the resistance and resilience embedded in her story. The room began to pulse with shared experiences, voices melding into a tapestry of struggles, triumphs, and reflections. With each narrative, walls fell, barriers crumbled, and an atmosphere of understanding permeated the air. As the discussions expanded, Maya felt her own confidence swell. She realized each revelation from those around her redefined her understanding of compassion and connectivity. She was evolving into a conduit for voices once silenced, reflecting a competence that surged from the depths of her being. But just as the tension eased, the young man interjected once more. You want unity and understanding, but what are we really achieving here? Feeling good about sharing stories won't change anything. Maya's heart sank, the critical perspective reminding her of the uphill battle they faced, an arduous pursuit where personal narratives had to break through systemic indifference. It felt like a knife to a tender wound, raw and exposed. She recognized this was not just about creating dialogue, it was about confronting systemic truths, mobilizing to act beyond conversation. Maya took a deep breath, determination coursing through her veins. "You're right. Storytelling alone isn't enough. It's a catalyst for something larger. It might compel us to advocate for policy change or challenge discrimination in our workplaces. This requires more commitment, accountability, and a willingness to transform these conversations into action." The air ignited with new purpose, a collective sense of responsibility igniting beneath the surface. Maya could sense a pivotal shift. Frustration was morphing into a shared ambition, a drive to confront unyielding challenges head-on. But a question loomed in her mind. Was she ready to lead this charge beyond storytelling? Would she remain steadfast against inevitable pushback? As the evening wore on, Maya couldn't help but reflect on this looming challenge. Leaders were not only creators of dialogue, but also architects of change. What would her next steps be to ensure their conversations bore fruit? Could she foster commitment beyond these walls? Just as she prepared to ponder that daunting thought, a new conversation started anew in the room, one that brought forth a wave of fresh emotions. It was clear this journey was only just beginning. Maya awoke the following day with her mind swirling a kaleidoscope of possibilities and uncertainties. The conversation from the previous night echoed in her head, the mix of skepticism and desire for change. Each voice had resonated with her, but moreover, they had imbued her with both energy and doubt. She felt the burden of leadership, knowing it was now on her shoulders to harness this momentum. Sipping her coffee, she pulled out her notepad and began to draft a plan. Her initial instinct was to create a series of workshops, something structured that could guide them deeper into the conversations they had started. But as she furiously jotted down ideas, a sharper wave of frustration surged within her. Workshops alone wouldn't cut through the apathy that still loomed outside that gathering room. Maya paused. What had she learned last night? Storytelling was powerful, but personal connections devolved into systemic awareness. They would need to face the uncomfortable truths, the biases, the systemic failures, the very fabric of societal inequities. Would an approach steeped in vulnerability foster authenticity in their discussions, or create a risk of backlash from those who clung fiercely to their beliefs? The self-doubt gripped her momentarily, but she pushed through. Maybe, just maybe, the reluctant young man's skepticism was her greatest ally. His query reminded her that her leadership needed to be more than initiating conversation. It had to inspire actionable change. With newfound resolve, Maya drafted an outline that fused personal storytelling with actionable dialogues focused on systemic issues. She would invite speakers who had successfully navigated these challenges and fostered change in their workplaces. This connectedness could become a blueprint for her colleagues, opening their minds and hearts to examine their environments through a different lens. Later that afternoon, she scheduled meetings with a few colleagues she'd observed as more open-minded. During these conversations, she presented her idea for the initiative and asked for their feedback. They seemed intrigued, especially when she emphasized how storytelling would serve as a springboard. Yet as she spoke, doubt flickered in the back of her mind. Was she simply indulging herself in idealism, or would these efforts mirror the painful realities of attempting to rattle systemic cages? One colleague, Sarah, voiced an important concern. It's vital we don't present this as a one-off feel-good activity. If we do this, we need commitment, follow-through, or else we risk disappointment. Sarah's words cut through Maya's enthusiasm, mirroring the young man's skepticism, a chilling reminder of the potential futility of their plans. "I agree," Maya replied, feeling the weight of responsibility rest heavier upon her. She could feel the urgency swelling within her, a call to action contrasting sharply with the uncertainty of her peers. We must define measurable outcomes. If we show tangible results, we can generate a ripple effect that won't just disappear. As their discussions progressed, ideas began to crystallize. They noted down potential metrics for success, workshop participation rates, feedback surveys, and post-engagement assessments. The energy shifted as they each began to visualize how their involvement might contribute to the whole, almost as if they were lighting candles in the dark, illuminating paths forward. By the end of the day's meetings, Maya felt a mix of exhilaration and exhaustion. She was slowly crafting her path as a leader, becoming more deliberate in her words and actions. Yet as she returned home, an unsettling thought plagued her mind. Would her efforts resonate beyond these discussions, or would they fade into the background noise of everyday routines? Tonight, the young man's voice lingered in her consciousness. They weren't merely seeking understanding, they were striving for change. Real, actionable, institutional change. As she lay awake, contemplating the road ahead, she knew she had to prepare not just for support, but for the inevitable pushback. What strategies could she employ to prepare herself and her colleagues for the confrontation ahead? Would they buckle under scrutiny, or could they convert their collective stories into a proactive force for change? Maya's resolve deepened. She would not be satisfied with talk alone. She had to find ways to build resilience, unity, and a clear action plan. The journey was only just beginning, and she needed to be ready for whatever might come next. As dawn broke, Maya faced a new day with trepidation pulsing at her core. The plan she was constructing felt both liberating and suffocating. She took a deep breath and brought her attention back to the notepad. Its pages filled with the ink of hopes and fears. Each idea was a step in her evolution as a leader, a transformation she needed to embody rather than merely theorize. She decided that today would be different. Instead of the familiar confines of her office, about which she was beginning to feel claustrophobic, she sought the outside world, the park near her building, where the air didn't just promise freshness, but a kind of connection she yearned for, a stage to observe, to engage, where stories were alive in the laughter of children and the musings of strangers sharing a moment. With the sun brightening her steps, she found a bench and spread out her notes. The juxtaposition of the vibrant life around her clashed sharply with the heaviness of her thoughts. The weight of potential resistance loomed, pressing her to strategize how to keep her colleagues engaged and accountable. An idea sparked. What if personal stories could be captured not just in spoken word, but in a tangible format? Perhaps here she could create a visual narrative, a wall of stories where others could not only listen, but see, a mosaic of experiences woven together in a visual tapestry that illustrated their collective struggles and triumphs. This could invite reflection and, paradoxically, spur the conversations she feared might be ill-received. Maya paused, allowing doubt to intrude momentarily. Would people commit to sharing their stories? Would anyone care enough to contribute to this symbolic expression of shared humanity? She clenched her jaw, rejecting that line of thinking. If documentation fostered engagement, then it was worth the risk. That evening, rejuvenated yet still restless, she convened another meeting with her allies. The colleagues who had previously seemed open-minded now appeared to carry their own burdens. Maya sensed the undercurrents of their unease, the caution rising amidst the positivity she had hoped to cultivate. As she shared her new idea, she was met with silence. Their silence was heavier than the last round of discussions. It crackled with skepticism. "That's a big step," Sarah finally spoke up, her brow furrowing. "Do you think everyone's comfortable exposing that vulnerability publicly?" The question hung thick in the air, a challenge wrapped in concern. Maya's pulse quickened. "Isn't vulnerability what we need?" she shot back, invigorated but defensive. "If we don't take risks, we can't really challenge the status quo." Encouragement and dissent swirled together. She could feel it drawing out her hesitations. She needed to frame her leadership in a way that harnessed this conflict, not shied away from it. Direct confrontation was inevitable, and to grow, she had to cultivate resilience, not just her own, but within her team as well. As she left the meeting, she felt an urge to do something unexpected. She sought out the young man from her initial conversation. His perspective had been sobering. Maybe his voice could act as a reflective tool. With each step toward his office, she mentally rehearsed her words. Would he still be skeptical? Would he dismiss her ideas as naive? But what if he felt empowered to contribute? That could turn dissent into dialogue. Her heart raced at the prospect. Confrontation was often uncomfortable, and this moment could illuminate not just her path forward, but also his. They would need to challenge each other, to deepen their collective understanding of resistance, vulnerability, and what credible change looked like. The door swung open, and she stood before him, a woman ready to fight for her ideas, but also seeking allyship. Would this meeting move them closer to a shared vision, or would it fracture the hope she harbored? Determination coursed through her. The next hour would reveal whether she could transform doubt into partnership, making both of their stories part of this evolving narrative. She inhaled and stepped in, aware that the moment of truth was upon her, and the journey toward meaningful change was just beginning. The moment Maya stepped into his office, her heart thrummed with a mix of anxious anticipation and fierce determination. The cluttered desk, strewn with papers and coffee cups, was a stark reminder of the chaos that often defined their work. The young man looked up, his expression shifting from surprise to curiosity. "Maya, what's up?" he asked, gesturing for her to take a seat. She felt a moment of hesitation, how to frame the weight of her thoughts into this brief conversation, but she had to try. "I wanted to talk about the meeting earlier, the idea of sharing personal stories." He leaned back, arms crossed, his brow still furrowed in skepticism. "It's a bold idea, but you know vulnerability isn't easy for people. You could lose them completely." She nodded, acknowledging his point, but not willing to accept defeat. "I understand. But what if we framed it differently? It's not just about vulnerability. It's about growth and connection. It could create a platform for shared experience. The risk could pull us closer together." He regarded her carefully. "That's a nice thought, but it's easier said than done. Not everyone wants to expose their fears and failures, especially in a corporate setting where everyone is constantly eyeing each other for weaknesses." Maya recognized the truth in his words. She thought about the impersonal nature of their work environment, where vulnerability was often viewed as a liability. True, but isn't it more dangerous to keep everything bottled up? If we don't know each other's stories, how can we build trust? The room fell silent for a moment. His gaze softened, mulling over her words. She pressed on, feeling her own resolve strengthen. "What would it take for you to feel comfortable sharing your story, or even just part of it?" He hesitated, the internal conflict evident on his face. "Well, I guess that depends on the context. If we create a safe space—" "Exactly," she interjected, excitement surging through her. "If we give this the right context, a collaborative narrative format, it may empower rather than exploit. We could do this together." His skepticism floated away, replaced by a semblance of curiosity. "Okay, you got my attention, but what if it's a complete flop? What if people resist it even more after we start?" That was the crucial question, and Maya could feel the tension radiating in the air. Failure was a potential outcome she couldn't overlook. "Then we learn. We adapt. It's part of the process. Leadership isn't about avoiding risk. It's about engaging with it constructively." Her words hung in the air like a promise. He looked down for a moment, processing this shift. She could almost see the gears turning in his mind. "What if I help you plan this out? I'm not a fan of sharing personal stuff, but I can help design something that works for people." Maya took a breath, a flicker of hope igniting in her chest. That would be incredible. Your insights could bridge the gap between those who want to participate and those who hold back. The resolve was gaining momentum. She could feel a change, both within herself and in the atmosphere of the room. The young man was softening, allowing space for a partnership to evolve. "Let's tackle this together," he proposed finally, "but we need to be transparent. I'll bring my concerns about this to the next meeting, but we need to frame this as a journey. If we face the pushback together, it will help." She smiled. This was how transformation began. Collaborative engagement challenged their fears, created new narratives, and built empathy. But as excitement surged within her, a darker thought lingered. What if their efforts backfired? As she left his office, the exhilaration of potential seeped into her bones, even as uncertainty shadowed her mind. The path ahead was murky, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this alliance could fracture just as easily as it could succeed. With her next meeting looming, would they be able to galvanize their colleagues, or would the fear of vulnerability lead to embattled silence? Maya inhaled deeply, recognizing that the true challenge was about to unfold, and it wouldn't be as simple as she had hoped. The real work began now. How could they construct a narrative strong enough to endure both scrutiny and encouragement? Maya returned to her desk, her mind racing. As she settled in, she opened her notebook and jotted down thoughts and strategies, attempting to calm the vacuum of uncertainty swirling within her. Each word she scribbled felt like a stepping stone through the fog of doubt, clouding her vision for the upcoming meeting. "Frame it as a journey," she repeated to herself, feeling the weight of that phrase resonate. It would be crucial to shape their narrative compellingly, emphasizing evolution and transformation rather than discomfort and fear. Engaging others meant crafting a compelling backdrop for shared stories, one that promoted growth and connection rather than mere disclosure. Yet the fear lingered, the fear that her colleagues might latch onto the very vulnerabilities they were supposed to transform into strengths. As she flipped through her notebook, she suddenly had an idea. She would create risk scenarios. This could serve as a safeguard, something that would ensure they could pivot when faced with the potential backlash of sharing too much. Rather than submitting to their worst instincts, she could equip her colleagues with tools to navigate the treacherous waters of vulnerability. She envisioned her meeting agenda unfolding, introducing the concept of storytelling, highlighting the possibility of growth, presenting risk scenarios, and leading discussions on how they could safely navigate discomfort should it arise. This was a decisive moment. It was as if she were laying the groundwork for both her professional development and her personal growth. As the meeting approached, Maya grappled with her own anxieties. What if they rejected her ideas outright? What if the room filled with derisive laughter instead of the reflective silence she envisioned? The notion of being a leader, not just in title but in action, was intimidating. It demanded courage, the willingness to stand at the forefront amidst the unknown. Later that day, she decided to practice her presentation in front of the mirror. "This is about creating a culture of trust," she asserted, her reflection mirroring the fierce conviction in her voice. She envisioned her colleagues, their skeptical faces shifting as they began to understand her vision. Confidence surged within her, but it vacillated with the haunting shadows of doubt. As she practiced, she noticed her pulse quickening. She had to confront her fears of judgment. It was imperative not only to deliver her message, but also to embody the authenticity she sought to inspire. It was a delicate balance, depicting her courage while employing the vulnerability she preached. A subtle truth dawned on her. Her leadership wasn't merely about guiding others. It was also about being brave enough to illuminate her own path. Finally, the meeting day arrived. Maya's heart pounded as she entered the room, her colleagues already assembled at the long conference table. The atmosphere was tense, a palpable blend of curiosity and skepticism hanging in the air. She caught glimpses of sideways glances and whispered conversations. Taking a deep breath, Maya centered herself. "Thank you all for making time today. I'd like to share something that I believe could deeply impact our work culture." As she dove into her prepared notes, Maya felt an exhilarating rush of purpose. She described the power of storytelling, framing it not as a disclosure of weakness, but as a strategy for collective growth. Then she broached the risk scenarios, but her voice shook slightly as she spoke. Would her colleagues appreciate her foresight? The anticipation of potential pushback loomed in the room. She noticed a few furrowed brows, indicating concern rather than outright rejection. With every point she made, her confidence grew, igniting a spark of engagement among her peers. The energy shifted, and she sensed a growing curiosity. But just as she reached a pivotal moment, an interruptive question sliced through the air. "What if people refuse to share, Maya? What is our next step?" The voice was inquisitive yet pointed, a critical test of her preparation. Maya hesitated just a fraction too long, swallowing hard. This was where her strategy would either solidify or unravel. "Then we must respect their choices," she replied, steeling herself. "But we have to encourage an atmosphere where safety is prioritized. It's all part of our journey." As she surveyed the expressions around her, uncertainty flickered within her, but she pressed on, undeterred. The moment was crucial. Could she galvanize her colleagues to embrace their discomfort, or would they retreat into the safety of silence? The stakes couldn't feel higher, and yet a revelation surged within her. She had the ability to transform the narrative, to shift from fear to empowerment. With this newfound resolve, she prepared to address another pressing question when the door swung open unexpectedly. A senior manager walked in, her presence instantly commanding attention. Maya's heart raced, uncertainty washing over her once again. Now it was time to face the unknown, she thought, her pulse echoing the challenge ahead. Would her message resonate enough to withstand the scrutiny of a seasoned leader? Maya crossed her arms, her heart battling between trepidation and excitement. The senior manager took a seat at the table, her presence shifting the dynamics in the room. The atmosphere tightened, and Maya felt the weight of anticipation pressing in from all sides. After a moment of silence, the senior manager smiled. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." I heard whispers of a new initiative, something that sparked significant interest. Maya steadied her breath, her resolve crystallizing in that instant. This was her moment, an opportunity to showcase not just her ideas, but the collective will of her peers. "Yes, we're discussing a storytelling initiative aimed at fostering understanding and dismantling preconceived biases within our workplace," she said, her voice growing steadier with each word. The senior manager raised an eyebrow, intrigued yet cautious. "Interesting concept. But tell me, how do you perceive this will affect productivity? Can vulnerability truly coexist with corporate goals?" Maya leaned forward, the moment sparking renewed energy within her. Vulnerability can unlock tremendous potential. When we foster understanding and connectivity, we cultivate an empowered team which significantly enhances collaboration and productivity. It's about transforming individual stories into collective strength. The room hung onto her words, the tension softening slightly as curiosity brewed. The senior manager pondered before nodding slowly. "And what measures will you put into place to ensure this doesn't devolve into personal grievances?" Maya smiled, seeing an opening. "We've prepared frameworks for managing discussions and providing support for those who may feel overwhelmed. This isn't merely an emotional exercise. It's a structured approach to empower everyone involved." She recognized that the senior manager's questions were more than queries. They reflected the skepticism that often accompanied innovation. This was a chance to not just validate her initiative, but also solidify her confidence as a leader. "So, what's your plan for implementation?" the senior manager continued, her gaze unwavering. Maya briefly outlined her strategies for pilot discussions and risk scenarios, emphasizing the importance of regular feedback to adapt the initiative based on team responses. The senior manager nodded, an approving glimmer breaking through her previously stern expression. "It seems you've thought this through." A wave of relief washed over Maya. She sensed the shift in approval from her peers as well. It wasn't just about navigating potential pitfalls, it was about their collective readiness to embrace change. The possibility of opening this door to interaction and vulnerability, to nurture understanding beyond mere corporate jargon, was becoming tangible. "Let's see how you can pilot this effectively," said the senior manager, her tone shifting. "If we garner good results, it could pave the way for broader implementation throughout the organization." Maya felt a surge of energy as the room erupted with a chorus of murmured excitement and encouragement. Over the following weeks, as Maya meticulously planned the initial discussions, she was fueled by unwavering determination. Their first storytelling session became a saga of personal revelations woven with shared laughter and tears. People's shields began to lower, revealing the collective humanity within the room. The young man who had once challenged her ideas shared an emotional narrative about growing up feeling like an outsider among peers. His vulnerability resonated with others, drawing out their stories and forging connections that transcended their differences. Maya observed the transformation, the initial skepticism replaced by curiosity and camaraderie. The same colleagues who once held a lifeless mask of professionalism began to engage with sincerity. This was her achievement, a clear manifestation of her personal growth as a leader and changemaker. Amidst this evolution, Maya found her footing in her new role, her confidence evolving from uncertainty to unwavering competence. She earned the respect of her peers and the acknowledgement of her higher-ups, effectively demonstrating that change could flourish from courage. The final session became a celebration, a testament to their shared commitment to vulnerability and understanding. Maya stood at the front, surrounded by her colleagues, and proudly articulated the journey they had traveled together. Trust had been reformed through honest storytelling, and she recognized that this was just the beginning of a larger movement, one she would continue as a fierce advocate for justice and empathy, both inside and outside her workplace. In that authoritative moment, she knew she had embraced her full potential, not just as an agent, but a leader capable of transforming narratives and cultivating dialogue. She had conquered the doubts that once held her back, channeling her passion into empowering others. Maya walked out of that room infused with an undeniable sense of pride and purpose. Her badge had indeed become a symbol not just of authority, but of meaningful and lasting change. Now the call for action resonates. You need to subscribe now to witness how one powerful story can create impact. This is the moment to show your support and ensure you don't miss our next exclusive tale of personal triumph. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your click matters. Comment below your reactions and theories about Maya's phenomenal journey, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this empowering conclusion. Your contribution shapes more than just views. It nurtures a community invested in change.